Drunk GF told my friend she wasn't pregnant by me. It was just another Saturday night at one of our friends' parties. The kind of thing where everyone brings their own beer, the music's too loud, and people gather in little groups talking about the same old stuff, work, sports, whatever. I was feeling good, standing there with Emily, my girlfriend of 3 years, talking with some mutual friends. She looked beautiful as always, laughing at some joke, her hand casually resting on my arm. In that moment, I remember thinking how lucky I was. I had no idea how fast everything was about to blow up. At some point, Michael, my best friend, motioned me to come over. It was weird. He looked serious, like something was wrong. "We gotta talk," he said, his voice low and urgent. I followed him outside, away from the noise, feeling a knot form in my stomach. We stopped near the side of the house where it was quieter, just the faint hum of the music behind us. "I don't know how to tell you this, man," Michael started, his hands fidgeting like he didn't know what to do with them. I could tell he was struggling to find the words, which only made me more anxious. "Emily's been seeing her ex, David, for months." I didn't say anything at first. It didn't make sense. "Emily? What the hell are you talking about?" My heart is racing. Michael ran a hand through his hair, clearly hating every second of this. "She told me last night. She's pregnant, and it's not yours. It's his, David's." He looked away, avoiding my eyes like he couldn't bear to see the devastation he knew he was delivering. I stood there frozen, my whole world spinning out of control. Pregnant? Her ex? My mind couldn't process it. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, some sick joke, but Michael wasn't the kind of guy to mess with me like that. He was my best friend, and if he was telling me this, it had to be true. "She was going to let you think the baby was yours," he added softly, like that would somehow make it better. Instead, it felt like the final blow, like everything I believed about Emily, about us, had been a lie. It was just another Saturday night at one of our friends' parties. The kind of thing where everyone brings their own beer, the music's too loud, and people gather in little groups, talking about the same old stuff, work, sports, whatever. I was feeling good, standing there, with Emily, my girlfriend of 3 years, talking with some mutual friends. She looked beautiful as always, laughing at some joke, her hand casually resting on my arm. In that moment, I remember thinking how lucky I was. I had no idea how fast everything was about to blow up. At some point, Michael, my best friend, motioned me to come over. It was weird. He looked serious, like something was wrong. "We gotta talk," he said, his voice low and urgent. I followed him outside, away from the noise, feeling a knot form in my stomach. We stopped near the side of the house where it was quieter, just the faint hum of the music behind us. "I don't know how to tell you this, man," Michael started, his hands fidgeting like he didn't know what to do with them. I could tell he was struggling to find the words, which only made me more anxious. "Emily's been seeing her ex, David, for months." I didn't say anything at first. It didn't make sense. "Emily? What the hell are you talking about?" My heart is racing. Michael ran a hand through his hair, clearly hating every second of this. "She told me last night. She's pregnant, and it's not yours. It's his, David's." He looked away, avoiding my eyes, like he couldn't bear to see the devastation he knew he was delivering. I stood there frozen, my whole world spinning out of control. Pregnant? Her ex? My mind couldn't process it. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, some sick joke, but Michael wasn't the kind of guy to mess with me like that. He was my best friend, and if he was telling me this, it had to be true. "She was going to let you think the baby was yours," he added softly, like that would somehow make it better. Instead, it felt like the final blow, like everything I believed about Emily, about us, had been a lie. I stood there, my back to her, breathing hard, trying to keep it together. Part of me wanted to walk out the door and never look back, but I couldn't. I needed to hear everything. I needed to know how deep the betrayal ran. "How long?" I asked, not bothering to turn around. My voice was low, calm, like the calm before a storm. There was a long pause, like she was trying to find the right words to minimize the damage. "A few months," she finally said, her voice shaky. "A few months," I repeated, nodding to myself. I turned to face her, seeing the guilt all over her face. "So what?" "All that time, You just looked me in the eye, pretended everything was fine. You let me believe we had a future together. Tears were streaming down her face now, but I didn't care. She deserved to feel every bit of the pain she'd caused me. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, wiping her eyes. It started as just talking. I wasn't planning on it. I don't even know how it happened. I shook my head. You don't know how it happened? You made a choice, Emily. You chose to see him. You chose to sleep with him. Don't stand there and act like you just tripped and fell into his bed. She started to cry harder, her body shaking. I'm sorry, okay? I never wanted this to happen. I was confused. Confused? I cut her off, feeling the rage bubbling up again. Confused is not knowing what to order for dinner, Emily. This is betrayal. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a whole damn plan. You were going to let me raise his kid. At that, she broke down completely, collapsing onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I was scared, she sobbed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hurt you, but You didn't want to hurt me? I had barked, incredulous. What the hell do you think this is? You've already done the damage, Emily. You lied to me every day for months. You cheated on me, and now you're pregnant with another man's kid. How do you even come back from that? She didn't answer. She just cried into her hands, her shoulders shaking. The room was filled with the sound of her sobs, but all I felt was emptiness. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, had been lying to me all along. There was no going back. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I wasn't going to get anything else from her. The truth was out, and now it was time to walk away. But before I left, there was one last thing I needed to say. Take a pregnancy test, I said, my voice flat. Prove to me that what Michael said is true. She looked up, her face wet and puffy from crying. But she didn't argue. She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Okay, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Okay, I'll take one. I nodded and walked toward the door. I couldn't stay there any longer. I'll be back tomorrow, I said, my voice cold and distant. We'll see what the test says. But either way, we're done. And with that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me, leaving her sobbing on the couch. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The heaviness in my chest was still there, pressing down on me. Everything about the day before felt like a nightmare that I couldn't shake off. The disbelief, the anger, it just lingered like a bad taste in my mouth. But I had to go back. I needed the truth laid out in front of me. No more games, no more lies. I drove to Emily's place in silence. No music, no distractions. Just the sound of the road and the thoughts running wild in my head. What if she wasn't pregnant? What if she had lied about that too? What if she'd been lying about everything from the start? I didn't know what to believe anymore. The woman I thought I knew was a stranger. When I got to her apartment, I took a deep breath before knocking. The door opened slowly, and there she was, looking like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying, and she was still in the same clothes as the day before. Hey, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't say anything. I just walked past her into the living room, where the test was sitting on the coffee table, right next to a box of tissues. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. It's done, she said softly, standing by the door, wringing her hands together. It's positive. I stared at the little plastic stick, my mind going blank for a second. There it was. Proof. Everything Michael told me, everything I feared. It was all real. She was pregnant. With his kid. I felt my throat tighten, my fists clenching at my sides. I wanted to scream, break something, anything to release the fury building up inside me. But instead, I just stood there breathing hard, trying to hold myself together. So, that's it then, I said, my voice hollow, barely recognizing the sound of it. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears again. I'm so sorry, she whispered, stepping closer like she was going to reach for me. But I moved back. Don't, I snapped, glaring at her. You don't get to be sorry, Emily. Not for this. You made your choices. She stopped in her tracks, her face crumpling as the tears started falling again. Please, just let me explain, she pleaded. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I still love you. Love? I laughed bitterly. You don't even know what love is. You slept with him, you lied to me, and you were going to trap me into raising his kid. That's not love, Emily. That's manipulation. She crumpled to the floor, sobbing, but I couldn't feel sympathy. I was too far gone, too hurt to care anymore. I knew this was the end. There was no coming back from this. I can't do this, I said, turning away from her. I'm done. We're done. You need to figure this out on your own, because I'm not going to be a part of it. I started toward the door, but she scrambled to her feet, rushing after me. Please, she cried, grabbing my arm. Don't leave me. I need you. I'm scared to do this alone. I yanked my arm away, not even looking back. You should have thought of that before, I muttered, my voice cold and final. And then I was out the door. I didn't look back, didn't hesitate. I just walked away, knowing that whatever we had, whatever future I thought we were going to have, was gone. She had destroyed it all. Walking away from Emily's place should have felt like a relief. Like I was finally free from all the lies, from the weight of her betrayal. But it didn't. The second I got into my car, everything hit me all at once. The pain, the anger, the complete sense of loss. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, fighting the urge to just scream. How did it all come to this? 3 years down the drain, gone in an instant. It was like the life I had imagined, the one where I married Emily, had kids, built a future. It had just been ripped away from me. And the worst part? I hadn't seen it coming. Not even a little bit. I thought we were solid. I thought I knew her. I drove around aimlessly again, not sure where to go or what to do. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to sit in my apartment surrounded by all the memories we'd made. Every corner of that place reminded me of her. Every little thing felt like it was tainted now, like nothing in my life was untouched by her betrayal. So, I ended up at Michael's place. He opened the door as soon as I knocked, looking like he'd been expecting me. I guess he knew how much this whole thing would tear me apart. How'd it go? He asked, stepping aside so I could come in. I shrugged, my throat tight. She admitted it, I said, my voice flat. The test was positive. It's his kid. Michael didn't say anything for a second, just nodded, his expression grim. Man, I'm sorry, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't know how else to tell you, but you had to know. I know, I said, dropping onto his couch and staring at the floor. You did the right thing. I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do now. He sat down across from me, giving me a look that told me he wished he had an answer. I don't think there's any easy way to handle this, he said carefully. You did what you had to do, walking away. Now, I guess you just take it day by day. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Day by day. Sounds like a great plan. I sighed, rubbing my hands over my face, feeling the exhaustion setting in. She wants me to forgive her, you know? She's scared, doesn't want to be alone, wants me to raise the kid like it's mine. Michael's eyes widened a bit at that. She actually said that? Yeah, I muttered. Like I'm just supposed to forget she cheated and played daddy to some other guy's kid. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. That's messed up, man. You don't owe her anything. You've been more than good to her, and this is how she repays you? It's not your responsibility to clean up her mess. I knew he was right. Deep down, I knew that staying would have destroyed me even more. But there was still that part of me that felt broken. Like I was losing more than just her. I was losing the life I thought I was going to have. I thought she was the one, Mike, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought she was it. Michael shook his head, a sad look crossing his face. I know, man, but she wasn't who you thought she was. You can't build a life with someone who's willing to lie to you like that. I nodded, knowing he was right, but still feeling like I was drowning in it. I don't know how to move on from this. How do you just pick up the pieces after something like this? Michael leaned back, thinking for a moment. One step at a time, I guess. You've got to cut her out of your life, man. Block her. Don't let her pull you back in. She's only going to drag you down. I sighed, knowing that was probably the only way forward. But it didn't make it hurt any less. Over the next few days, I tried to follow Michael's advice. I blocked Emily's number, stayed off social media, and did my best to avoid anything that would remind me of her. But no matter how hard I tried, she kept finding ways to get to me. It started with the texts. I'd blocked her, sure, but she found other ways, using random numbers to send me long, guilt-tripping messages. Every day, there'd be a new one. She'd say she was sorry, that she was terrified of losing me, that she didn't want to raise the baby alone. She promised over and over that it was a mistake, that she was confused, that she still loved me and wanted to make things right. But I couldn't even read them after a while. I didn't need any more of her lies messing with my head. Then she started showing up at my apartment. The first time, she knocked on my door for hours, calling my name through the crack, begging me to let her in. I sat on the couch, staring at the door, feeling like a prisoner in my own home. Her voice was desperate, breaking every now and then, and for a second I almost opened the door just to make it stop. But I didn't. I knew if I opened that door, if I saw her face again, I might do something stupid like take her back. And after everything she'd done, I couldn't let that happen. The second time she came by, it wasn't just knocking. She was banging on the door, yelling loud enough that I knew my neighbors were probably hearing everything. She was crying, telling me she didn't mean to hurt me, that she needed me. Her voice cracked, and I could hear her sliding down to the floor on the other side of the door, sobbing uncontrollably. It took everything in me to stay inside, to not walk out there and tell her to stop. But I didn't. I just stayed quiet, waited for her to get tired, waited for her to leave. But Emily wasn't giving up. The next thing I knew, she started calling my family. First it was my mom, then my sister. She was telling them all kinds of crap, trying to make it seem like I was abandoning her when she needed me most, that I was heartless for walking away when she was pregnant. She spun it like I was the one leaving her and the baby out in the cold, conveniently leaving out the part where the baby wasn't mine. My mom called me, concerned, wondering why Emily was so upset and why I hadn't told her what was going on. I hadn't told anyone the details yet, trying to deal with the mess on my own. But now, I had no choice. So, I told her everything. Every dirty detail. The cheating, the pregnancy, the lies. I could hear the shock in her voice, the disappointment. She'd always liked Emily, thought we'd end up married. "I'm so sorry, honey," my mom said after I finished, her voice heavy with sympathy. "I had no idea she could do something like that. Don't worry, I'll handle it from here. She won't bother you again." As much as I appreciated her saying that, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. Emily was persistent, like a bad dream that wouldn't go away. The worst part was when she showed up at my parents' house. I don't even know how she convinced herself it was a good idea. She went over there crying, telling them she made a mistake and didn't want to lose me, playing the victim like she hadn't betrayed me in the worst way possible. My mom called me afterward, completely thrown off. She came here, Andrew. She was a mess, saying how much she regrets everything. "She's really shaken up. She's not your problem anymore, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "She cheated on me. She lied to me. She was going to make me raise another guy's kid. I can't just forgive that." "I know, honey. I know," my mom replied, her voice soft but firm. "But she's not thinking straight. She's scared. Maybe once the baby's born, she'll move on." I hung up, knowing it wasn't over yet. Emily wasn't going to let go that easily. Every day felt like a battle just to keep her out of my life, but I knew I had to hold my ground. I couldn't let her back in. I thought things couldn't get worse after Emily showed up at my parents' house. I was wrong. She didn't stop there. It was like the more I pushed her away, the more desperate she became to pull me back in. And it wasn't just texts, calls, or her showing up at my place anymore. She started dragging our mess into public. It started small. She would show up wherever I was, whether it was at a bar with friends or just running errands around town. I'd see her out of the corner of my eye, hovering like a shadow. One time, I was at the grocery store just grabbing some stuff for the week, and there she was standing by the entrance waiting for me. "Andrew, please," she called out, her voice loud enough for everyone around to hear. "Just talk to me. You're not even giving me a chance to explain." People started staring, and I could feel my face getting hot, the embarrassment creeping up my neck. I turned to walk away, but she followed, her voice louder and more frantic. "Do you really hate me that much?" she cried, and I could see people whispering, eyes on us like we were the latest episode of some trashy reality show. I didn't say anything. I just kept walking, pushing the cart faster, trying to block her out. But she wasn't done. "You're going to abandon me? Abandon the baby?" After everything, she yelled, her voice echoing down the aisle. I snapped. I couldn't help it. I stopped, turned around, and looked at her dead in the eyes. "It's not my baby, Emily," I said, loud and clear for anyone within earshot to hear. "I'm not abandoning anyone. You made your choice, remember?" Her face fell, and for a second, she looked completely shattered. People were staring, some awkwardly pretending not to watch, but most of them didn't even bother to hide their curiosity. I didn't care anymore. Let them see. Let them know the truth. I turned and walked out of the store, leaving her standing there alone in the middle of the aisle. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, I was out with some friends, Michael and a couple of other guys at a local bar. I was trying to distract myself, trying to feel normal again, like I wasn't carrying around the weight of everything that had happened. For the first time in a while, I was starting to relax, actually laughing at one of Michael's stupid jokes when I saw her. Emily, standing near the entrance, scanning the room until her eyes locked onto me. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told her where I'd be, but somehow, she found me. She always found me. I muttered under my breath, "You've got to be kidding me," and the guys looked over, following my gaze. Michael was the first to react. "Shit, man, do you want me to get her out of here?" But before I could answer, she was already pushing through the crowd, making a beeline straight for me. Her face was a mess, tears, smeared makeup, the works. It was clear she wasn't here to talk calmly. "Andrew, please," she yelled, right in front of everyone. "Why are you doing this to me?" I stood up, trying to keep my cool, but inside, I was boiling. "Emily, go home," I said, my voice firm but low, not wanting to make a scene. But she was past the point of caring about scenes. "No," she screamed, drawing the attention of practically everyone in the bar. "You're not listening to me. I made a mistake, okay? Why can't you just forgive me? I love you. I need you." People were watching again, whispering to each other, some pulling out their phones like this was entertainment. The humiliation burned in my chest, but I was more angry than anything. Angry at her for turning this into some kind of soap opera. Angry at myself for ever letting it get this far. Michael stepped between us, holding up his hands. "Emily, you need to leave. This isn't the place." But she shoved him aside, her eyes wild with desperation. "No, he needs to hear me out. You don't understand. He's leaving me to raise this baby on my own." I clenched my fists, my jaw tight. "The baby isn't mine, Emily," I said through gritted teeth. "Stop telling people that." She flinched like my words had slapped her across the face. For a second, I thought maybe that would be it. Maybe she'd finally get the message. But then she just started crying again, louder this time, sobbing for everyone to hear. "You can't just walk away like this," she wailed, dropping to her knees right there in the middle of the bar. "I made a mistake, Andrew. I can't do this alone." I turned away, unable to handle it anymore. The crowd was staring, whispering, pointing. I grabbed my jacket, threw some cash on the table, and stormed out, Michael right behind me. As soon as we got outside, I leaned against the wall, running my hands through my hair, trying to calm down. "She's losing it, man," I muttered, my heart still pounding from the scene. Michael shook his head, his face serious. "She's not going to stop until you completely cut her off. Like legally." I knew he was right. I had tried to avoid it, hoping she'd eventually move on. But this was getting out of hand. It wasn't just my life she was ruining now. It was my reputation. And I couldn't let her keep doing this. That night after the bar incident, I realized Michael was right. There was no way this was going to stop unless I made it stop. Emily wasn't just hurting me anymore. She was dragging me down in front of everyone. My friends, my family, even strangers at the grocery store were becoming part of this twisted game she was playing. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I explained everything, the cheating, the pregnancy, how she was showing up everywhere, harassing me, embarrassing me in public. The lawyer listened carefully, asked a few questions, and then got straight to the point. "You need to file for a restraining order," she said, her voice professional but firm. "It sounds like this has escalated to the point where you're being harassed. The restraining order will make it clear she can't come near you or contact you. And if she does, there will be legal consequences." It felt extreme. Part of me still didn't want to go that far, didn't want to think about what filing a restraining order would mean. But I couldn't live like this anymore. Emily wasn't going to stop unless I made her. So I did it. I went down to the courthouse and filed the paperwork. I explained everything in detail, how she was stalking me, harassing me, how she wouldn't leave me alone no matter what I did. It felt strange, writing it all down like that, making it official. But once it was done, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, like I was finally taking control of the situation. A few days later, the restraining order was granted. Emily was served the papers, and just like that, she was legally bound to stay away from me. She couldn't call me, text me, show up at my apartment, or make a scene in public without risking serious legal trouble. At first, it was quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. I didn't see her lurking around the places I usually went. It was like she had finally disappeared. For a brief moment, I started to think maybe, just maybe, it was over. But then, as if on cue, she showed up again, this time at my job. I was sitting at my desk, just going about my day, when I heard her voice. I looked up and saw her standing in the doorway of my office, her face a mix of desperation and anger. "You filed a restraining order against me," she hissed, stepping into the room, ignoring the shocked glances from my coworkers. "Are you serious, Andrew? This is how you deal with things now." I stood up, my heart racing. "Emily, you need to leave now," I said, my voice low but firm. "You're breaking the restraining order." She scoffed, folding her arms across her chest. "You think a piece of paper is going to stop me? You can't just erase me from your life like that. I'm pregnant, Andrew. You don't get to walk away that easily." My hands clenched at my sides. "It's not my baby. You need to leave before I call the police." She glared at me, her eyes filled with a mix of rage and hurt. "You think I won't do whatever it takes to get you back? I'll never stop, Andrew. You think you can just shut me out of your life, but you can't." Before I could respond, one of my coworkers must have called security because two guys appeared behind her, ready to escort her out. "Emily, leave now," I said again, my voice shaking with both anger and exhaustion. She looked at me one last time, her face twisted in a mixture of anger and sadness. "You're making a mistake," she whispered before turning and walking away with security at her heels. I collapsed into my chair, my head pounding. Even with the restraining order, she was still finding ways to invade my life. But that was the last straw. I called my lawyer immediately, and by the end of the day, I had filed a report with the police. If she came near me again, she'd be arrested. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of everything. It had come to this: legal action, security, police reports. Emily had pushed me into a corner where there was no other way out. I had no choice but to cut her out completely, no matter how much it hurt or how messy it got. I wasn't sad anymore. I was just tired. Tired of the drama, the lies, the constant harassment. I realized that the woman I had once loved, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, was gone. Or maybe she was never really who I thought she was to begin with. After the restraining order incident at my job, things quieted down again. Emily seemed to finally get the message, at least for a while. Weeks went by without any contact from her. It was like she had vanished from my life. And for the first time in months, I started to feel like I could breathe again. But even though she was gone, there was still one thing hanging over my head: the baby. The fact that she was pregnant wasn't something I could ignore, even if I wanted to. Every time I thought about it, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I knew the baby wasn't mine, I knew it, but part of me still needed that confirmation. I couldn't fully move on until I had concrete proof. So, I did what I knew I had to do. I requested a paternity test. I got in touch with Emily through my lawyer. I didn't want to deal with her directly, didn't want to open the door to any more drama. Through the legal channels, I made it clear that I wanted a paternity test once the baby was born. If she refused, we'd take it to court. It was the only way to end this nightmare once and for all. When the day of the test finally came, I felt like I was walking into a war zone. I hadn't seen Emily in months, and part of me hoped she had changed, that maybe all the craziness had been some kind of temporary breakdown. But when I saw her at the clinic, holding her newborn baby, the look in her eyes told me otherwise. She was still the same Emily, desperate, bitter, and clinging to whatever hope she had left that I'd come back. We didn't speak. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on, but I kept my distance. I didn't even look at the baby. I couldn't. My heart was still too raw, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate me into feeling anything. The test was quick. A swab for me, a swab for the baby. The clinic staff were polite but distant, probably sensing the messiness of the situation. As soon as it was over, I walked out without a word, not even glancing back at her. And then came the waiting. The days dragged on, every one of them filled with a sick knot in my stomach. Even though I was 99% sure the baby wasn't mine, there was still that 1%, that tiny, nagging doubt that refused to leave me alone. What if, by some insane twist of fate, the baby was mine? What then? Could I just abandon it? Could I really walk away from my own flesh and blood, even after everything Emily had done? I tried to push those thoughts away, telling myself it was impossible. But they haunted me every day, no matter how much I tried to drown them out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the results came in. I opened the envelope with shaking hands, barely able to focus on the words in front of me. But there it was in black and white. Probability of paternity, 0%. Relief flooded through me, so intense that I almost felt dizzy. It was over. The baby wasn't mine. I was free. But the relief was mixed with something else, something I hadn't expected. A deep, aching sadness. For months, I had been consumed with anger and betrayal. But now, holding those results in my hands, I realized something. A part of me had wanted the baby to be mine. As messed up as it sounds, a part of me had been ready to step up, to take responsibility, because I had spent 3 years of my life planning a future with Emily. And now, that future was completely, irreversibly gone. I sat down, staring at the paper, trying to process it all. I didn't have to worry about raising another man's child. I didn't have to deal with Emily anymore. But the finality of it hit me harder than I expected. It was really, truly over. I called Michael later that day, telling him the results. He was relieved for me, of course, but he could sense the weight of everything. "You did the right thing, man," he said, his voice calm. "You needed this closure." "I know," I replied, though I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. I just didn't expect it to feel like this. Like, everything's gone. Michael didn't sugarcoat it. "You're grieving, man. It's normal. You spent 3 years with her, thinking she was your future. It's gonna hurt for a while." He was right. Even though the baby wasn't mine, even though I had escaped the worst-case scenario, it still felt like I'd lost something huge. Something I couldn't get back. But at least now I could start moving forward. I could rebuild. I didn't have to live under the weight of her lies anymore. I spent the next few days in a weird sort. The anger that had fueled me for so long was gone. But it had left behind this aching emptiness that I didn't know how to fill. I tried to go back to my routine, go to work, hang out with Michael, go to the gym, but everything felt off, like I was just going through the motions without really living. Michael kept checking in on me, making sure I wasn't falling into some dark pit of depression. "You should be celebrating, man," he said one night when we were sitting at his place, having a beer. "You dodged a bullet. You don't have to raise someone else's kid. You don't have to deal with her lies anymore. It's a clean break." "I know," I said, staring at the label on my beer bottle, peeling it off with my thumb. "I know I should be relieved. And I am, I guess. But it still feels weird. Like I spent 3 years thinking we were building something real, and now it's just gone." Michael sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, I get it. It's like mourning a relationship that never really existed, right? You thought it was one thing, and it turned out to be something completely different." "Exactly," I muttered. "Like all the plans we made, all the conversations about our future, they're just fake now. It wasn't real." Michael nodded, taking a swig of his beer. "That's the hardest part, man. Realizing that someone you trusted, someone you loved, wasn't who you thought they were. But you've got to stop punishing yourself for it. You didn't know. She tricked you. That's on her." I knew he was right. Rationally, I knew I couldn't blame myself for any of it. Emily had been the one who cheated, the one who lied, the one who tried to trap me into raising another man's kid. But emotionally, it wasn't that easy. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the loss of what I thought my life was going to be. A few days later, I got a call from my mom. She had heard about the paternity test results, of course. Word spread fast in our family, and I wasn't surprised she was calling to check in. "So, I heard the news," she said, her voice gentle. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I lied, leaning back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. "I mean, I got what I wanted, right? The baby's not mine. It's done." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear the concern in her silence. "You don't sound fine, sweetheart," she finally said. "I know this has been hard on you. It's okay to feel whatever it is you're feeling right now." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't even know what I'm feeling. One minute, I'm relieved that it's over, and the next, I feel like I've lost everything. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. "You've been through a lot, Andrew," she said softly. "It's going to take time to heal. But you will heal. You'll find your way again." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that one day I'd wake up and feel normal again, that I wouldn't feel this constant ache in my chest every time I thought about how things could have been different. But right now, it felt impossible. "I know," I mumbled. "I just wish I could fast forward through this part, you know? Skip the whole trying to move on phase and just be okay. I wish I could fast forward for you too," she said with a sad chuckle. "But you gotta let yourself feel it. That's the only way you're going to get through it." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. I knew everyone around me was right. Michael, my mom, they all told me the same thing, that it was going to take time, that I couldn't rush the healing process. But that didn't make the days any easier. It didn't stop me from waking up in the middle of the night, my mind racing with memories of Emily and everything we'd been through. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I started to feel the shift. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the sharp edges of my pain started to dull. I still thought about Emily, sure, but it didn't sting as much. The ache in my chest started to fade, little by little, and for the first time, I started to think about what was next for me. I knew I couldn't let this define me forever. I couldn't let Emily and her lies control the rest of my life. So, I made a decision. It was time to start rebuilding. I wasn't sure where to begin, but I knew I couldn't stay in this place of hurt and anger forever.